Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez stepped out of the subway station in the Bronx, her steps brisk, her mind tangled in the weight of another long day of committee hearings and community meetings. She had barely made it up the concrete stairs when a gruff, weathered voice stopped her in her tracks. "Can you give me $1?" the man asked. He wasn't shouting, he wasn't begging, he just asked it plain, almost as if he already knew the answer would be no. The voice came from a man slouched beside the station wall, sitting on an old piece of cardboard, wrapped in 2 tattered coats that still weren't enough to fight off the biting wind. His beard was patchy, his face gaunt, but his eyes were alert, watching her carefully, like he wasn't just asking for money, like he was asking for something else entirely. She paused, not because she hadn't heard that question before, but because of how it was asked. Most people would have just walked on, she could have. No one would have blamed her, she had places to be, appointments lined up, calls to return. But something about the man's tone stopped her. It wasn't desperation. It was defiance. A challenge. Not just, "Can you give me $1?" but "Do you even see me?" And in that moment, Alexandria did. She saw the man not as a statistic, not as a public policy case, but as someone who had once lived a full life, who maybe still dreamed of something more. The street around them was moving fast. People dodged around her, some giving annoyed glances, others not noticing at all. But Alexandria didn't move. She took a slow breath and walked toward him. "What's your name?" she asked, kneeling slightly to meet his eye level. The man blinked, caught off guard by the question. "Everyone just calls me Danny," he muttered. "Doesn't really matter anymore." "It matters to me," she said, and there was no performance in her voice, no political tone, no angle, just sincerity. Danny didn't smile, didn't nod. He just looked at her, uncertain. "So, can you give me $1 or not?" he asked again, more guarded this time, like he was preparing to be disappointed. Alexandria reached into her coat pocket, but didn't pull out any money. Instead, she said something that shifted the air completely. "Tell me what you would do with it." She wasn't being smug. It wasn't a test. But the moment she said it, the expression on Danny's face changed. He straightened a little, like someone had handed him a piece of his dignity back. For a second, he said nothing. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, he said, "I'd go to the corner deli. They got this egg sandwich that's hot and greasy and reminds me of when I used to have a kitchen. I'd get that. Just that. I ain't eaten since yesterday morning." Alexandria nodded slowly. "Okay." Then she did something no one expected. She sat down beside him. Right there on the cold sidewalk, no press, no entourage. Just her and a man everyone else had learned to walk past. The wind whipped through her coat as people gawked, but she didn't care. "Let's talk," she said. "Not about politics. About you." And for the first time in years, Danny didn't feel like just another ghost on the street. He felt seen. He felt heard. And he hadn't even gotten the $1 yet. Danny didn't know what to make of it. He glanced sideways at Alexandria, unsure if this was some kind of publicity stunt or a joke at his expense. No politician ever sat on the concrete beside him, let alone without cameras flashing or staff hovering nearby to sanitize the optics. But Alexandria was quiet now, just looking ahead at the foot traffic like she had all the time in the world. For a moment, Danny couldn't take the silence. "You don't got to do this," he muttered, voice low with something between embarrassment and exhaustion. "People like me. We're just part of the scenery." Alexandria turned her head toward him slowly. "That's the problem," she replied. "Too many people have gotten used to stepping over others and calling it normal. I'm not interested in pretending it is." Her tone wasn't righteous. It was flat, almost pained. She pulled out a folded napkin from her coat pocket, probably from lunch earlier that day, and laid it on the ground between them before placing a small bottle of water on it. "Here," she said. "It's not much, but at least it's clean." Danny stared at the gesture as if it were an alien ritual. "You're really doing this?" he asked again, his voice raspier now. "You're really gonna sit here and play sidewalk therapist?" Alexandria didn't flinch. "No, I'm going to listen." She glanced at him, then added, "Unless you'd rather just eat in silence." "Either way, I'm not going anywhere." Danny let out a humorless chuckle, rubbing his calloused fingers over his jaw. "I've been homeless 6 years. Lost my job in 2019. Didn't bounce back. Didn't have savings. My sister died of COVID and the landlord wanted to raise rent. I was out by November. Friends stopped answering calls after a few months. Family? Hell, I don't know where they are. It's been me and this sidewalk for a long time now." Alexandria didn't interrupt. She didn't give him a pitying look. She just sat there, absorbing every word like it weighed something. And it did. "The hardest part ain't the cold," Danny continued. "It ain't even the hunger. It's being invisible. Like, I could die right here on this corner, and 3 people would step over me before someone thought to call for help." He paused, then laughed to himself. "I'm not even mad at them. They've been trained to look away. That's the world we built." Alexandria let the silence settle again before answering. "Then maybe it's time we rebuild it differently." She reached into her coat pocket once more, but instead of $1, she pulled out her phone. "I know a shelter nearby. It's run by people who actually care. No red tape, no lectures. But I'll only call them if you want me to. This is your choice, Danny, not mine." He blinked, staring at her like she was offering him $1 million, not a ride to a shelter. "Why?" he asked. "Why would you help someone like me? What do you get out of this?" Her reply was instant. "Nothing. That's the point. Not everything should be transactional. Some things should just be human." And for the first time, Danny looked away not out of disrespect, but because it was suddenly hard to look directly at someone who refused to see him as disposable. The people around them had started to notice now. A few took pictures. Others stared, confused, but Alexandria didn't care. She tapped her phone, then turned to Danny again. "The van can be here in 15 minutes. They'll bring you food. Real food. And if you want help, they'll listen. But if you say no, I'll still sit here with you for as long as you want. You asked me for $1. But maybe what you really needed was someone to give a damn." Danny exhaled, the weight of it all catching up to him. "You sure you're not running for something right now?" Alexandria smiled faintly. "No, Danny, right now I'm just trying to be human." Danny sat there stunned, and not because Alexandria had called a van or offered him a bottle of water. People had dropped spare change, old sandwiches and half-hearted kindnesses before. What shocked him, what truly knocked the wind from his chest, was that she didn't seem to be in a hurry to leave. Even now, with curious passersby snapping photos and a few people whispering her name with disbelief, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez stayed right beside him like she wasn't one of the most recognized political figures in the country. "You really ain't leaving?" he asked again, his voice lined with disbelief. Alexandria shook her head gently, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "I said I'd wait with you. I meant it. I don't do this to be seen, Danny. I do it because I've lived it." Her voice dipped low, not performative, not polished for a stage, but worn and weighty like truth itself. "I grew up watching my family worry about bills, watching people around me pretend everything was okay because there was no space for struggle. So no, I'm not leaving just because people are uncomfortable." That hit something inside Danny he hadn't felt in a long time. Not sympathy, not charity, but recognition. He looked away again, eyes blinking too fast for his liking. "I forgot what that feels like," he muttered. "Somebody stayin'." His throat caught for a second, then steadied. "You know, most folks don't even look me in the eye. Sometimes I think I could catch on fire out here, and no one would blink. Cops pass by like I'm part of the pavement. Suits walk past holding coffee that costs more than I eat in a week." He leaned his head back against the concrete wall behind him, the roughness scraping the hood of his jacket. I started pretending I liked being invisible. Felt safer than needing something nobody wanted to give. Alexandria didn't respond right away. She just let the words sink in, her eyes fixed on the corner of the sidewalk where a pigeon picked at a crumpled wrapper. "It's easier to numb out than to feel the sting of being ignored," she finally said. "But numbing out doesn't make it stop. It just makes it lonelier." Danny studied her like she was some strange anomaly that didn't fit into the world he knew. "What are you even doing out here anyway? Ain't you got security or like Senate meetings or some camera somewhere you're supposed to be talking into?" He didn't mean it to be rude, but the question came out sharper than intended. Alexandria didn't take offense. "I was headed back from a meeting actually," she replied. "Saw you when I passed. You looked straight at me. You weren't begging. You weren't smiling. You just looked tired and honest. And I thought, if I walk past him now, then I'm everything I say I'm fighting against." Danny stared at her hard for a second, testing her words. "You're serious," he said. "You really believe that?" Alexandria met his stare without flinching. "Of course I do. And you know what? People hate that. People hate when someone like me believes too much. It makes them uncomfortable, because deep down they know they should believe too, but they gave up a long time ago." The traffic didn't pause, and the world didn't slow down. But around that corner, time stretched as two completely different lives shared the same air, the same sidewalk, the same raw silence between truths. "You ever sleep out here?" Danny asked suddenly. "You ever feel cold all the way to your teeth and pretend you're just camping so your mind doesn't shatter?" Alexandria's reply was quiet, but immediate. "Not like this. Not on the street. But I've known cold. I've known desperation. I've known what it's like to lie awake listening to your mother cry into a pillow because rent's late and payday's a week away. I've known hunger so specific that even now, years later, I can still remember what it felt like to drink water just to make the ache go quiet." Danny exhaled hard, almost like a laugh but closer to disbelief. "Ain't the kind of stories they let you say on TV." Alexandria nodded. "That's why I'm saying it here." They sat without speaking for another minute, maybe two. And then, Danny reached into his coat and pulled out a crumpled, yellowed photograph. "This was me," he said, handing it over like it weighed nothing and everything. "Me and my sister. We used to dream stupid big. Talked about starting a catering business. She made the best peach cobbler in the Bronx." Alexandria held the photo with gentle hands, studying it like a sacred text. "You had plans," she said. "You had a life that matters." Danny shrugged, but there was a crack in the wall now thin, barely there, but enough for air to pass through. "I guess life just had other ideas." Alexandria folded the photo and handed it back carefully. "Then maybe it's time we start having ideas of our own again." In the distance, a white van turned the corner, the logo of the shelter barely visible through the grime of the city. Danny saw it and instinctively recoiled. "I don't know if I can do it," he said quickly, eyes darting. "What if it's more promises? What if it's another hand that pulls away after the cameras stop rolling?" Alexandria didn't answer with optimism or false hope. She said, "Then we take it 1 hour at a time. You try today. If it sucks, I'll know. If they fail you, I'll hear about it. But maybe, just maybe, they don't." She stood slowly, brushing off the seat of her pants. "You don't have to trust them, Danny. You just have to trust yourself enough to walk into something better." The van stopped. The door opened. A man stepped out with a clipboard and a gentle face. "You must be Danny?" he asked. Danny hesitated, then stood up, wobbly from the cold and fatigue. "You said they got food?" Alexandria nodded once. "Hot food. Real food. And a clean bed if you want it." Danny looked at her one last time. "You don't even know me. You didn't have to stop." Alexandria gave him a look that could have cut through steel. "That's the point, Danny. That's exactly the point." He stepped forward, not fast, not certain, but forward. And just like that, the world shifted imperceptibly, but irrevocably. Danny stood at the edge of the shelter's threshold, one hand still buried in the ragged pocket of his coat, the other clutching the folded photo of his sister like a lifeline. The man from the van, Javier, didn't push. He just stepped back and nodded toward the open doorway. Inside, it was nothing special, just a narrow hallway that smelled faintly of bleach and warm rice. But to Danny, it looked like another trap, another promise that might vanish the second he let his guard down. Alexandria stayed behind him, silent, watchful. Not leading him, not pushing him, just being there. He finally took a step in. One step, then another. His shoulders hunched and his head low, as if expecting the whole thing to collapse the moment he committed. But it didn't. The door didn't slam shut. No one barked orders. A soft-spoken woman behind a desk offered him a warm smile and asked his name not in the way bureaucrats do, like they're already done with you, but in a way that suggested she was actually interested in the answer. He hesitated, then muttered, "Danny," just that. No last name. No details. And she nodded, wrote it down, and offered him a tray with hot soup, rice, and a few slices of banana. He looked at it like it was a feast from another planet. "You don't have to eat it here if you don't want to," the woman said. "But it's fresh. And it's yours." Alexandria watched from the doorway, arms crossed, not smiling but steady, like she was holding the moment in place. Danny sat, ate, not like someone who was ravenous, but like someone testing whether the food would disappear before he got too attached. He didn't speak for a long time. But every few bites, he glanced at her like she was the only real thing in the room. "You still there?" he asked eventually, barely above a whisper. "Still here," she said. He nodded once. "I ain't used to that." After the meal, Javier offered him a room for the night. It wasn't much a cot, a shower, and a small window that overlooked the alley, but it was more than concrete and freezing air. Danny stood in the doorway for a while, staring inside like it was a museum exhibit from a world he didn't belong to. Then, without a word, he stepped inside and sat down on the edge of the cot. Alexandria stayed by the entrance, leaning against the wall. "You're not here to save me, are you?" he asked. "No," she answered immediately. "I'm here because I believe you still matter, even if no one else acts like you do." His eyes dropped to the floor, his voice raspy. "I forgot how that feels." There was a long silence, one of those silences that hurt more than noise. Then, in a tone that had lost all performance and all politics, Alexandria spoke again. "The system makes it easy to forget yourself, Danny. It's designed that way. But your story, your life isn't over. You still get to write what happens next." Danny looked up at her, and for the first time since they met, there wasn't just exhaustion in his eyes. There was something flickering beneath it. A question, a maybe, a faint, burning what if. He laid back on the cot slowly, his legs dangling over the edge. "If I sleep tonight and wake up tomorrow, and this place is still here, if you're not some weird hallucination I dreamed up, I'll tell you everything. The whole damn story." Alexandria gave him a nod, sharp and certain. "Then I'll be here in the morning." She turned to leave but paused at the door. "You asked me for $1, Danny. I'm giving you a future instead. It's harder, but it's real." And with that, she left no cameras, no applause, just the sound of her heels echoing through the hallway. Danny laid there in the dark, staring at the cracked ceiling, wondering how one conversation on a filthy sidewalk could leave him feeling more human than he had in years. He didn't know what would come next. But for the first time in forever, he wanted to find out. The next morning, Danny woke to the smell of coffee and the sounds of a bustling kitchen. The bed he'd slept in the night before was still a foreign concept, the sheets a stark reminder that he hadn't truly rested in months, maybe even years. But today felt different. The weight of the world, which usually crushed him with every step, seemed lighter, just a little. He rubbed his eyes, the dim light from the small window casting a soft glow on the cot. The faint sound of voices in the hallway reached his ears, but he stayed still for a moment, letting the silence settle around him. It wasn't real. He kept telling himself it wasn't real. He wasn't supposed to have this. But then the door creaked open. Alexandria stepped inside, holding a cup of coffee in her hands. She didn't say a word at first. She just handed him the cup, her eyes meeting his. Danny sat up slowly, taking the cup with both hands. The warmth seeped through him, grounding him in the moment. He didn't know what to say. He hadn't known how to respond to her last night either. But something was shifting in him. Something he hadn't felt in so long. Hope. "You were right," he said quietly, his voice rough but clear. "Last night, I don't know what to make of it, but maybe I do have a story left to tell." Alexandria gave him a soft, almost imperceptible smile. "You do. You're just taking it one step at a time. That's all anyone can do." Danny took a sip of the coffee, savoring the warmth of it against the cold ache in his bones. He'd been surviving for so long, never truly living. He had told himself that he was fine, that this was all he deserved, that this was all there was. But now, he felt like a piece of himself that had been missing for years was slowly returning. The walls he'd built around himself, the ones he'd used to survive on the streets, were crumbling. And in their place, a new foundation was being laid. One where he could finally breathe. "Do you think I can really do this?" Danny asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Start over? Get out of this mess?" Alexandria sat down beside him on the edge of the cot, her presence calming, unwavering. "You're already doing it," she said, her voice steady and grounded. "You took the first step by walking through that door last night. That was the hardest part. The rest? It's just about finding people who will help you rebuild. And you don't have to do it alone." Danny looked at her, his eyes searching, like he was trying to figure out if she was telling the truth, or if this was some twisted trick the world had played on him. But something about the way she said it, the sincerity in her voice, made him believe her. For the first time, he didn't feel like he was just an afterthought in someone else's story. He felt like his life mattered. The door opened again, this time with Javier and a few others from the shelter. They were carrying bags filled with clothes, toiletries, and a few other necessities, things Danny hadn't even dared to hope for. He froze for a moment, unsure whether to trust what was happening. But then he saw Javier's warm smile and the kindness in the eyes of the other volunteers. "We got you covered, Danny," Javier said, placing the bag at his feet. "You're not alone in this. We've got a plan for you, and we're going to help you get back on your feet. But it's going to take time. It won't be easy." Alexandria stood up, giving Danny one last look of encouragement before stepping back. "It's not going to happen overnight," she said, "but it will happen. You have to believe that." Danny looked up at her, his throat tight. He couldn't remember the last time someone had said something like that to him. "Thank you," he whispered. The words felt small, inadequate for what she'd just given him. But they were all he could muster. With the bag of clothes in his hands and the weight of the world feeling just a little lighter on his shoulders, Danny stood. He had no idea what the future held. There was still so much to rebuild, so much to face. But for the first time in what felt like forever, he wasn't walking into the unknown alone. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. As he made his way toward the door, Alexandria stayed behind him, watching him take the first steps toward something new. "This isn't the end, Danny," she called after him. "This is just the beginning." And with that, Danny stepped out of the shelter, his heart full of possibility. The road ahead wasn't easy, and it wasn't clear, but for the first time in a long time, he was walking it with hope, with a purpose, and with the belief that he deserved better than what he had settled for. And Alexandria? She'd given him the greatest gift of all, the chance to try again, to find himself, and to finally believe that he was worthy of more than just survival. It was the beginning of a new chapter, one that Danny had almost given up on, but now, thanks to Alexandria, he was ready to write. Months passed since Danny had left the shelter, and with each passing day, he felt himself slowly but surely getting back on his feet. The road hadn't been easy. There had been setbacks, long nights of doubt, and moments where he thought about giving up. But the support from Alexandria, Javier, and the shelter community had pushed him forward when all he wanted to do was fall behind. He found a job working at a local community center. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't high-paying, but it was enough. Enough to pay rent, enough to keep food on his plate, and more importantly, enough to start believing in himself again. He spent his days setting up events, helping people with the resources they needed, and organizing local programs for those who, like him, had once been lost. The job was humbling, but it gave him something he hadn't had in years: of purpose. Danny's co-workers were from all walks of life. Some were veterans, some were single mothers, and some had come through the same struggles he had. But what they all shared was a deep, unspoken understanding of hardship. They didn't ask for pity, and they didn't give it. They just showed up, did their work, and helped others along the way. It felt good to be part of something, to be valued, and to give back in ways he'd never dreamed possible. In his free time, Danny started saving what little he could. He knew he had to be smart about it, to plan for a future that didn't just consist of surviving from paycheck to paycheck. He spent his evenings working on his idea, a small catering business. It had started as a dream, something he'd toyed with back when he was on the streets, when he had nothing but a backpack and a deep passion for cooking. Now, with a steady income and the guidance of those around him, it was starting to feel like a real possibility. The first steps were small. He started by cooking for local events, using the community center's kitchen when it wasn't in use. It was just a few friends, a few neighbors, and people from the center who offered their help. But the feedback was immediate and positive. His food was different. It wasn't fancy, but it was flavorful, soulful, and made with a kind of care that came from his own life experience. Danny knew the value of a good meal. It wasn't just about the taste. It was about the memories it could create, the comfort it could bring, the connections it could foster. Word spread fast. A few local businesses hired him to cater for small gatherings. Soon, he was offering his services for birthdays, office parties, and even weddings. Danny could hardly believe it. He was building something out of nothing, and each step forward felt like a victory. The more work he took on, the more confident he became in his abilities. The sense of accomplishment he felt when he saw others enjoying the food he'd prepared was immeasurable. It wasn't just about money anymore. It was about doing something that mattered. But he never forgot where he came from. His success wasn't just his own, it was the result of the support he'd received. It was the people who had given him a chance when he had nothing. He made it a point to hire others who had faced similar struggles. He gave jobs to people who, like him, had been ignored, forgotten, or overlooked by society. His catering business wasn't just about profit. It was about lifting others up, showing them that there was a way out, a way forward. Danny had experienced firsthand how one person's belief in you could change everything. Now he was paying that belief forward. Alexandria had reached out a few times to check on him. She'd always been supportive, always encouraging. But when she heard that Danny had started his catering business, she was overjoyed. She came by one afternoon to see him in action. Danny had been busy preparing a spread for a local charity event, and when Alexandria walked in, she was met with the unmistakable scent of fresh bread, roasted meats, and vibrant vegetables. "You're doing it, Danny," she said, smiling as she took in the scene. "You really are. Look at this." Danny was focused, chopping vegetables with a practiced hand. He looked up, a grin spreading across his face. "It's all coming together, slowly but surely." He wiped his hands on a towel and gestured to the space around them. "I still can't believe this is mine." that I'm actually making a living doing this. You've earned every bit of it, Alexandria replied, her voice warm with pride. You've worked hard, and now you're building something that will last. Not just for you, but for others. Danny nodded, his eyes reflecting the humility he'd always carried with him. I'm just getting started. There's still so much to do, but it feels good. It feels like I'm finally part of something bigger than myself. That afternoon, Alexandria stayed to help with the event. As they set up the food, talking and laughing together, Danny realized just how far he'd come. He wasn't just the man who had asked Alexandria for $1 months ago. He was a man with a plan, with a future, and with the kind of purpose that made every struggle worth it. In the end, Danny's catering business grew beyond what he had ever imagined. It wasn't just about feeding people anymore. It was about feeding hope, about showing others that change was possible, no matter how impossible it seemed. And while he didn't forget his past, Danny knew that his future had no limits. And Alexandria? She remained one of his biggest supporters. She had given him a chance, but more importantly, she had shown him that he was capable of giving himself a chance too. And in that, he had found his true strength.
Thank you for watching our channel Modern Stories. If you liked our video, you should subscribe for more amazing videos like this. Have a healthy and happy day. See you in the next one.